Do you ever feel like your Nurgle campaigns have gotten a little stale? Does it seem like Grandfather Nurgle's toxic love is fading? Well, don't you worry. Gaming for Immersion is here with some ideas to rekindle that special fetid bromance with Kugath and put the fun back into spreading plagues across the map. These thematic armies strike a balance between ruthless effectiveness and pure flavor, because building the meta unit distribution in every army can get a little boring, while watching your endless hordes of nurglings disintegrate against mid-tier enemies can get a tad bit frustrating. Note that these are only suggestions. Hopefully they'll spark your own creative juices to come up with some ideas of your own. If so, please share them with me and others in the comments below. Before we jump in, note that Kugath and the Chaos Sorcerer Lord are the only lords that get unique traits to boost specific units. This is a bit of a trade-off. I generally like the races that give more direction to matching lords and heroes to units, but it does make Nurgle very versatile. Okay, now let's jump in. Thematic Army number 1. Kugath Nurglings in the early game, and Beasts of Nurgle in the mid and late game. This one is kind of obvious to experienced Nurgle players, but it's still thematic and bears mentioning. Kugath gets several unique buffs to Nurgling units that are available relatively early in the game, and can make a stack of these cute little demons surprisingly tough against most AI early game armies, especially once they get Pestilent Abundance. The biggest weakness is dishing out damage. For that you'll need to use your Winds of Magic or bring along a hero or two. Another weakness is sieging walled settlements, as Nurglings cannot use battering rams, siege towers, or ladders, and Kugath's missile attack will not break down gates or walls. For this reason, you may want to add a Soul Grinder or other siege attacker unit to a Kugath army. Even though the Lord himself has siege attacker, he is ridiculously slow and vulnerable to fire from the walls and towers. Better yet, have Kugath accompanied on the campaign map by a supporting Lord with some siege units. Finally, because Nurglings are chaff units best used bunched up together, they are vulnerable to spells and damaging effects like that pesky Mortis engine Gore starts with. Upgrading these Nurglings to Beasts of Nurgle will take a while, but ultimately keeps Kugath useful against higher tier enemies. You lose some of the value of the skill points allocated to Nurglings, but you still benefit from the red line trait that boosts both Nurglings and Beasts, so it's not a total loss and worth the transition. This is probably a good place to add a side note. Many of you are wondering, why not just respecialize Kugath at this point, taking those skill points out of Nurgling traits and reallocating them? Obviously the game allows you to do this, and I'm sure most players will want to do so. I only mention the trade-off because I find this new feature that CA added to be very immersion breaking. It just doesn't make sense to me for a character to forget their specializations and experiences and instantly gain new ones, so I don't use it. But to each their own, no judgment here, do whatever feels right to you. Alright, back to the main topic. Thematic Army number 2. Heralds and a demonic mix. Heralds are unit agnostic, meaning they receive no unit buffs to any particular unit type, so they're versatile. Still, they are demonic, so it makes sense to put them at the head of demonic armies. They have two options as mounts: Rotflies for zipping around in the air, and palanquins to stay on the ground. You can buff them a little, but be careful not to get them too locked in melee combat or exposed to archers. It can be great fun to hover around on your Rotfly, blasting the enemy with spells and occasionally unleashing the Locus of Contagion, but given a few shakes of a lamb's tail, a few decent missile units can have your Herald disintegrating in short order. As an alternative, you can replace the Herald with the Demon Prince of Nurgle. They're fast, they can fly, and they're good in melee or spell casting, meaning they can match up well with pretty much any type of army. Thematic Army number 3. Chaos Sorcerer Lords and Mortal Armies. Technically, these lords get a unique buff for Forsaken and Chaos Spawn units, and if it appeals to you to fill an army with those units, then by all means do so. That would be very thematic, but I'm not sure how effective it would be against most opponents. My thought is that because Chaos Sorcerer Lords are the only Mortal Lord option for Nurgle, it makes sense to put them in charge of your mortal forces: Marauders, Warhounds, Horse Cavalry, and the like. You can buff their melee stats a bit or focus on magic, and they have two different mounts available. a Chaos Steed for speed, or a War Shrine for more support. I usually prefer the latter to boost masses of Marauder melee infantry. Watching these fanatical cultists fearlessly fight, kill, and quite often die on the battlefield for their beloved Nurgle. But then again, if you're better than I at the micro, I would think a Sorcerer Lord with buffed melee stats leading the charge of cavalry and warhounds could be a lot of fun too. Of course, you'll have a lot more than 3 armies during a campaign, so you can mix and match armies to suit their purpose and your overall strategy. One for sieging, maybe a monstrous cavalry stack to work beside an infantry one, and so on. A good idea is to group significant numbers of units that are boosted by the same redline traits into individual armies in order to maximize Lord effects. One general suggestion: you may want to have one cultist of Nurgle in each army to boost its movement range on the campaign map. I like to think of these guys like the commissars in the Soviet armies circa World War II. They're there to make sure everyone is showing proper zeal for Grandfather Nurgle. On the other hand, I see Plague Riddens as optional for armies. At first glance, the casualty replenishment boost looks important, but once you unlock the Crumbling Ague Plague recipe, you can boost replenishment by plus 35%, thus shifting that buff from Plague Riddens from necessity to luxury. The extra spellcasting is useful, of course, but keep in mind that every Lord type available to Nurgle can cast spells already, so what I tend to do is supplement the Lord with a hero of the other school of magic, so a Nurgle school Plague Ridden with a Death school Lord and vice versa. Well, there you have it, just a few thoughts on keeping Nurgle thematic and immersive. Obviously, this is all subject to change when the next DLC drops, but hopefully the overall concept will hold true. What do you think? Any ideas or suggestions to add to the list? Have you built your own thematic armies that you want to share? Add your thoughts in the comments below. And in any case, thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next one.